Shalom. I want to start by giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Makar and give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Salutation to the hopefully elect, who is pushing this word in the four corners, the highways and byways. Once again, all praises, glory, and honor is due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Makar. Alright, this is Brother Zakaria here with another lesson, right? And so with everything not going on right now in terms of Donald Trump and this war with Iran, all right, and Israel, and other countries getting involved, right? Basically we enter in a time of war, all right, and we're reaching into a point of no de-escalation, all right? It's going to keep escalating and escalating from here onwards, all right? Until we in full-blown World War III, all right? Which technically we are already in World War III, all right? Because you look at it, the entire earth is at war, all right? The major powers of the earth is at war, right? And that's what World War is, because the way history is told, is from another point of view, all right? I say that to say this, in the beginning stages of World War I and II, they wasn't calling it World War, all right? It was just saying, Germany, trying to take over this place, then they conquer, let's say Austria, right? When they conquer Austria, they're like, they're trying to expand to Poland also, wherever the case was, but there wasn't at that time calling it World War, all right? Until after, they say when other world powers get involved, all right, they say, all right, now this is a large scale war, and probably till after that they're saying, this is World War II or World War I or whatever, but for context, right, World War II was approximately 4 years, all right? For the first 2 years, I'm pretty sure they wasn't calling it World War II, until America gets involved, and then everybody start picking a side, start saying, this is a global, scale war, right? But you can get into some scriptures and break it down, right? The 2nd Ezra 16 of verse 16, it says, like as an arrow is shot out of a mighty archer's, return it not backwards, right? So you never see an arrow shot by an expert archer fly backwards, and the Mosai is the ultimate, archer, all right? The ultimate expert everything, so he's not gonna make mistakes, right? When he says it's time for war, it's time for war. Right now, it's time for war, right? Motherfucker, let me get her, right? Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under the heavens. A time to born, a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. Right. And it's time to pluck up these world powers. Alright. Because the Most High put them there. Alright. The Most High planted, Trump in the position. Alright. And the entire nation of Edom in the position that they're in. Alright. Likewise the Ishmaelites, likewise the Moabites. The Most High planted them with these gifts and talents that He gave unto them. Alright? What it says also, the time to pluck up that which is planted. Right? So the Most High uprooting, these kingdoms right now. Right? Like it's saying Daniel, Yahushua is gonna come in the midst of all these kingdoms and break them to pieces. Right? Says a time to kill and a time to heal. Right, and now is a time to kill. Alright? Now is the time to kill. The time to heal is gonna come after, when Yahushua come, and heal His people. Right? But other than that, right now is a time to kill, for these nations to kill each other. Like it says in the book of Matthew and in 2nd Esdras that these nations gonna be fighting one against another, right? And in the midst of these battles, then shall Yahushua return, right? It says a time to break down and a time to build up. Right, this is a time to break down. Yep, this is a time to break down, right? Because Yahushua already give, these Eden, Salakia, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua already gave these Edens their time to have their kingdom, to build it up, right? And they do what they have to do, Now is this time to do what he has to do, all right, which is to break these kingdoms down. Again referencing Daniel. All right, let me see if I get a precept. And this is Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44. It says, and in the days of these kings shall the Most High of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break into pieces and consume all these kingdoms and shall stand forever. Alright, and ultimately there's the kingdom of Yasharallah. Alright, we're gonna break into pieces all these other nations, right? We're gonna break into pieces all these other nations, and that's the time that we're approaching, But even now is a time for these kingdoms to break each other into pieces. All right, because like they keep reporting, the United States is losing a lot of money going after this war, all right? And that is destroying their kingdom, On the same hand too, the kingdom of Iran, the Iranians, all right, the Persians, the Carmanians, whatever you want to call them, is being breaking into pieces as well, all right? All these you call them Arabian, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Dubai, they're being breaking to pieces by these wars. All right, because they're all on the fire right now, taking missiles. The state of Israel, right? And it's only time before Moab, all right, China, enter into the war, and they start, taking a beating, all right. So this isn't the time to heal or the time to build, all right. This is the time to break down and pluck out, all right, and uproot, right. Yeah, back in Ecclesiastes, in verse 4, it says, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Right? And this is a time for the heathens to weep. Right? This is a time for them to weep. But this is a time for the prophet to laugh. All right? The scripture said that. Right? Yeah, it can. It says a time to mourn and a time to dance. All right? Yeah, again, this is the heathens, time to mourn. All right? And the prophets, time to dance. All right? The elect, time to dance. Right? Verse 5, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. Right? And right now is the time to cast, stones. All right? Mosiah casting the great millstone to break this kingdom down. All right? Right? Hey, and even to gather the precious, the precious stones that was cast away, which is the elect. All right? A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Ooh. All right? Yeah, and this is the time to refrain from embracing this kingdom. All right? Because it's pure wickedness. All right? It's pure wickedness, and we're getting close to the ultimate time that we long to see. All right? The time of Yahushua return ultimately. All right? A time to get, a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sue. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. A time to hate and a time of war. A time of love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. Right? So this is the time of war, Yeah, it can, It says a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. Alright? And this is 100% not the time of peace. Alright? Because these wars is just gonna keep escalating until until everybody that is supposed to be involved get involved. Right? So don't get it twisted. This kingdom on its way out, on its way down. All right? All right, so with that, hopefully this lesson was edifying through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai Ba'ashem Agakadash. So shalom.